Hello. This episode is all about your glutes and why you're struggling to grow your glutes, which also ensures that your legs change too. It's also one of the things that there is so much confusion out there with how we should train, the optimal training, the best exercises, the best programming. How should you split your workouts? It makes sense why you're confused with it all. Now, there are two things that I need to address right off the bat. If your hip mobility isn't there, if you don't know how to use your foot and your foot muscles, if you don't know the importance of your big toe, it's going to be very difficult for you to get your glutes to work to the maximum that they could. Hip mobility is everything. You want to be able to get low enough without putting that pressure onto your back or other muscles. Your bottleneck is going to be your weakest link. You won't be able to keep adding more and more weight to your RDLs or your squats or squat variations like split squats and lunges, leg presses without there being some form of pain or compensation. And internal rotation, which is your legs kind of turning inwards, that is a key part of recruiting your glutes. But also, when you're squatting down, if you're already in internal rotation, as in, you know how people talk about the anterior pelvic tilt when you have the duck bum, and a lot of people squat with their bum out, or when you're doing the split squats, your natural tendency might actually be, okay, let's like stretch out my bum and stick it outwards, or Donald Duck it. That takes the tension off your glutes because that's opening your core. That's opening the compressed can, which is the bracing that is so important with all of this. With that being said, welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. I'm keeping it real as always. There's all these different things that Instagram throws at you, which I'm sure that if you're listening to this, you already know that glute banded stuff and pump workouts and 12, 15, 20 rep fluffery isn't the key to glute growth. That the best glute exercise isn't it either, because it's not just one exercise that's going to contribute to your glute growth. It's the principles behind those exercises. So this isn't going to be an episode on the best 5 exercises for your glutes, because it's not for people who want quick fixes. It's not for people who just trying to find the next best thing because everything they've already tried hasn't worked. I want to get rid of all of the noise and have you understand the elements that come into glute growth. So, what actually builds muscle? We know that we need to send the right stimulus to the muscle, trying to get stronger. You want to impose a demand on the target muscle to lift a certain amount of weight. Then, as the muscle gets used to that weight, you want to progress it over time. It's the tension on that muscle. But we also need to consider where the glutes best grow. We know that muscles best grow in their lengthened positions most of the time, the bottom range motions of an exercise. For example, your leg press, your Bulgarian split squats, your lunges, your squats, all those variations, it's at the very bottom because that's where you have the glutes under the biggest stretch. If you can get them under the biggest stretch and be able to lift a significant load with that over time and have that progress, that is an optimal exercise. That's inherently what makes banded exercises not count. Just because it burns or just because you feel it more doesn't mean that it's working more. The same with when you squat and then you do that weird pump thing at the top, or when you're doing Romanian deadlifts and then you squeeze your glutes at the top. Not where it's growing, it's in the bottom half of the position. On the contrary, when you're doing glute hyperextensions, it's yes in the stretch as well, because you're still carrying the weight and that's putting your glutes under stretch. It's also at the top because you're lifting the plate upwards. That's the peak point of tension. The further away from the ground you get with that weight on an angle where the glutes are under that max tension and is having to hold up this weight at this leverage away from your body. The further away that you hold the weight from your body, the longer the lever arm, the more that the glutes have to work to keep your body upright. Versus a hip thrust, where lingering in the bottom isn't gonna work. A lot of people get the hip thrust wrong in general because they just dump their pelvis or bum or bar and then they thrust it up. They don't keep tension on the muscles the whole time. That exercise is your glutes are best targeted in the squeezed position, which is the top of it. And a lot of people don't get that full hip extension because really tight hip flexors. That can be one as well, where a lot of back issues come into play because you don't have the hip mobility due to tight hip flexors. Usually is exhibited in your body as tight hamstrings. You feel your hamstrings are tight. We really know they're just weak, but they're pulled tight because now you have this anterior pelvic tilt, which has put the hamstrings in a stretch, which is why they feel tight. But really, they're just weak. And a lot of people have weak hamstrings, and it's very difficult to grow a huge set of strong glutes without stronger hamstrings as well, despite the big bums and tiny legs that you see. The solid glutes that are filled out come with a nice set of hamstrings. Plus, hamstrings are sexy. Why would you not want to work the backs of your legs and make them look tight and toned? So the first part of this is going to be me just addressing a few places where many of you might actually be getting stuck. So I've already touched on feeling your glutes doesn't mean you're actually training them effectively or that the exercise is effective for growth. The other one is just because your glutes are feeling sore doesn't mean that they got stimulated in a way that's going to grow them. Other one is a huge one, and that's you're still not eating enough food. It doesn't matter if you're eating over 140 grams of protein or over 120 grams of protein, whatever you consider high protein. That doesn't matter. If you're not fueling your body enough for the recovery to grow your glutes, you're not going to see them grow. You're not going to see them tighten up either, because tightening up requires you to build the muscle and fuel the workouts in a way that you can push yourself to the intensity required. That leads me to the other mistake. A lot of women that I see in the gym chase volume, as many reps, as many sets, as many exercises as possible. There's the changing programs every month. While you might be progressing over the weeks, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, if you're changing your whole program every 4 weeks, that's not true progress. Your brain is now adapting to new exercises. So what do we do about that? First of all, we need to stop stopping at the slightest sign of discomfort. We need to get on a program that allows us to truly challenge our muscles, because intensity is the main thing we want here. Not reps, not volume, not just stimulus for the sake of stimulus, but the right stimulus. Because doing all of the volume in the world without proximity to failure is just wasted effort. Now, it can also feel like you're going to failure and feel like you're training really hard, but it's very difficult to have that in the context of adequate stimulus for muscle growth if you're fatigued from all the prior sets, prior exercises, prior glute days, because you got told that 3 glute days a week is what you should be doing. Or because you didn't see results on 2 days a week, you decided to increase it. If you're doing 3 times 12 reps on RDLs all the time and stopping because you're tired or you're fatigued or it feels heavy, that isn't going to send any stimulus to your glutes, because it's very easy to feel fatigued from high reps, but it doesn't mean you're anywhere close to hitting the effective reps, close to hitting true failure point for the muscles. You don't need more reps. You need more effort per rep. And don't go into an exercise with, I'm going to hit 3 times 12 on this one. Know what your rep range is. Make sure you select an appropriate weight and take it to failure. Literal failure, like form failure, which is safer than complete muscular, complete life failure. If you keep hitting like 15 and you feel like even after 15, you still haven't really failed your form and your rep hasn't slowed down to the point where you're just like, I don't think I can get to the top of the RDL and get a proper full rep. Literally, you cannot get that full rep. Then you're using too light of a load for your 12 reps anyway. So that's the first thing we need to address. The other one, like I mentioned, you don't want to change programs every 4 weeks. You don't want to feel like something's not working and then try to pick up the next thing that Instagram shows you. It can be so believable and can actually help some people if there's like a celebrity trainer saying it targeted this particular muscle fiber of her glutes. Well, she's been training for 10 years. She's already built up a huge foundation doing all of the core fundamental moves. She probably still does all of the core fundamental moves. It's just that now she adds in these little fancy little frill things just to fill out the little extra bits. That's not to say that those things are doing anything anyway. She might actually benefit. and could benefit a lot more from just doing more of the basic fundamentals. And I don't know if anyone out there knows Hattie Boydell or Asher Coulthard, all these amazing figure pros. They have never done a kickback or fluffy bit most of the time in their whole life. Most of the basic core movement patterns are Romanian deadlifts, any form of split squats and lunges, any form of lunge pattern, squat pattern, which also includes the leg press. Those are the big bang for buck exercises. We want to emphasize movement quality and the ability to progress that exercise over time for weeks and weeks, because you don't need 6 new exercises every 6-8 weeks. You just need to keep getting better and stronger at those exercises. And just because you aren't increasing them anymore after week 6 or week 8 doesn't mean they're not working. That's when they start working. That's the other mistake that so many people make. I can easily say that's probably one of the most popular ones. I know I also did it. If I did not see something moving anymore, I would just change the exercise, or I would add more in to try to progress it in other ways. Versus no, we just need to keep sticking to the same freaking program. Don't go adding in more finishes thinking that that's going to grow the muscle more, because you're just burning it more or fatiguing it more. That doesn't equal muscle growth. So that's something you want to think on there. I am a huge fan of the leg press. I'm a huge fan of all squat patterns. They grow the glutes tremendously well. Tremendously well. You don't want to be in a position where you're like, I feel like my glutes are always working. I'm working my glutes out 3 times a week, but nothing's changing. Like, you don't want to be there. And the biggest issue is that intensity factor. It's really confusing. Just because you feel like the workout's really hard or you're lifting heavy, it doesn't mean that it's effective. And this is why having a smart program and being okay with being bored are probably the 2 biggest, could I say, characteristics of someone who gets results. You need to be okay with not seeing changes straight away. You need to be okay with getting bored of the same movements. You need to be okay with not seeing the weights go up for a while. But that not meaning that you're just taking it softly. You're actually pushing yourself to the absolute max that you can every single week. If you're still increasing your weight every single week, then you didn't start off hard enough to begin with. Over the first 4 weeks, yes, that's neurological shifting. You're getting better at the movement pattern. Or you improved your form, which has allowed you to lift heavier. I remember when I first did my bench press, like way back when I was competing, I went from, I don't even know where I started, but I was able to build myself up to like 50 kilos pretty easily without really any stall. And then I was stuck at 50 kilos for ages. And then all of a sudden, I'm at 57.5 kilos or something. I just bumped up a lot over, like, without any real time gap in between that. It was just 50 to 57.5. And that was just because I had my form fixed. That was when I finally signed up with a powerlifting coach. And I had my form fixed. And voila. Right now, same thing. I started a program and I increased dramatically over the first 6 weeks and got myself up to about 55 kilos. And the only reason I was able to do that is because I've lifted really heavy in the past with the bench press, but also I've done other movements to keep my chest strong. I've done dumbbell bench presses a lot of the time. I was up to 25 kilos on each arm for my dumbbell bench press. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because a great program will have you getting better at similar movement patterns as well. That is how you know you built muscle. If similar things are still able to stay there. For example, I haven't done one-arm dumbbell rows in a very long time. I got them put into my program for 3 weeks until I got them changed out again because they weren't recruiting my lats the way that my coach wanted them to. So he swapped it for a one-arm machine row because they're really effective at getting my rhomboids, but not my lats, and he wants to get my lats. So he swapped it for a one-arm machine row. But I was still able to get close to what I was doing before. Like, I used to do the 30 kilo dumbbell. I went right up to 27.5 and then I went to 30, and I was alternating between the two for the 3 or 4 weeks I kept it. The sign of a good program. It's not, you're not going back to scratch just because you haven't touched that particular exercise. It's not like I lost all of the muscles that were using the dumbbell row before. But when it comes to glute training, is like, there are different variations of single leg movements, like Bulgarian split squats, front foot elevated split squats, rear foot elevated split squats. There's lunges, walking lunges. There's reverse step backs or lunge step backs, whatever you want to call them. There's deficit step backs. There's dumbbell step ups. As long as you're able to increase that load over time, it is progress, but sometimes you're not able to because single leg movements, you're not going to be able to. I went from 17 to 20 to 22.5 to 25 kilo dumbbells on my Bulgarian split squats over the course of about 8 to 10 weeks. I think it was 8 weeks actually, but I've been heavier on those before, and I lift really heavy in a lot of my other leg movements. So it was a really quick increase. But for the last however long I've had them, yeah, I think it was 8 weeks, for the last however long I've had them, I have not increased a single rep or a single kilo. It's been the same reps and the same kilos. Could I get an extra rep out here if I wanted to? But I'm still hitting effective reps. I'm in between 6 to 10 reps each time. That's what my rep range is, but I hit 8 every single time for all 3 sets. And I know that that is still stimulating growth, even though I'm not forcing out extra reps, because those reps are still really freaking challenging. Really freaking challenging. You're not always going to be increasing your weights over time. And being okay with that is okay. It's understanding the nature of progress. And that's why this is fundamental to weight loss, to building muscle. Understanding what particular exercise progressions look like and progress in general. Some exercises you can push pretty damn hard, like the leg press. You could realistically increase that every single week for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I reckon anyone can increase that every single week because you only have to increase one rep over your sets. It might be 10, 10, 11, 10, 11, 11, 10, 11, 12, or 12, 11, 10, whatever. Or it could even be just adding a 2.5 pound plate or a 1.25 kilo plate on one side of the leg press. There is that in itself can be something that you just at least get excited at while everything else stays the same. Or the leg extensions, while it may burn, that can be a really good place for you to challenge yourself past the ouch, this is hard, this is burning, I don't think I can get one more. Well, actually, yeah, just take 5 breaths and then see if you can force out another 1 or 2 reps. Yeah, it's not a straight rep set, but it's teaching you to push past that ouchie point, a rest pause set, and it works. So this is intensity over everything, intensity over volume. You cannot out volume your way to a physique if your sets aren't hard enough. There is literally no way you can do that. So are you letting the number on your program dictate your reps, or are you letting your body's actual response guide you? Because you don't need more reps. You don't need more and more burn ouchy work. You need more effort per rep. So the best way to action the last few points that I said, which is progressive overload isn't just adding weight and it's all about training intensity, is to actually log how those exercises and sets and reps feel. Don't just write you hit X reps. How did it feel? How hard was it? Put as much detail as you can in there. This is something that I'm trying to work on again because I used to do it all the time. I've slacked on it and I really need to, because sometimes I'll go up and realize, shit, I thought this was easy last week, but I wasn't ready to go up. It just looked like I could on paper. Or I might have struggled the previous week, and instead of dropping the weight and building it up the right way, I might have thought that it was just a moderate weight. So write that down. Film yourself. Did your form break down? Did you slow down on the last rep? You don't want your form to be completely different on the last rep. You want your form to be pretty much the same thing, but you do want a slight deviation, and you definitely want to see a change in rep speed. Because progressive overload isn't about adding weight or adding reps or adding sets or just adding things. It's about what all of those additions, if you add them, what do they look like and what do they feel like? Because your muscle doesn't respond to numbers going up. It responds to increased tension on the muscle. It's just that increased tension shows itself through numbers going up, depending on what you're training. If you're training something like Bulgarian split squats, then get used to it being the same for a really damn long time. With a lot of things, you can probably squeeze out a rep one week and then not squeeze out the rep the next week, and that's completely fine. You're still getting a stimulus. Remember, the purpose of training is to send an effective hard stimulus. If you're someone who's already training really freaking hard, like the pro athletes, like me even, for example, although not every single session is going to be my best session, it's what accumulates over time. If you can think of it in that aspect, you'll stop being so hard on yourself and just realize, as long as I'm sending a progressive stimulus over time, I am building muscle. If I don't, then at least I can be safe that I'm maintaining muscle, because building muscle is so much harder than maintaining it. So if you're at least doing enough to maintain it, when half of the world is losing muscle because they spend so much time dieting, not eating enough carbs, and not eating enough protein, which I'm hoping that you guys understand by now, then you're doing a really freaking good job. And even if you're not eating enough protein and carbs, if you're eating just enough to maintain, as in you're not doing crash dieting, then you can be safe assured that you're maintaining your muscle because the muscle itself is in the training. So if you're in maintenance calories, but your training isn't all there, then you're not building any muscle. You can go into a surplus to make it easier, but you won't be building the muscle to fat ratio the way that we want it to. You're always going to have the muscle to fat coming on, but if you're training where it should be, we want a higher ratio of muscle to fat. That's how it should be. That's how you get the optimal gains. Being in a site surplus and training hard leads to the optimal muscle gains. And that's the only way about it. In maintenance, it's just a guessing game. But if you're training really freaking hard, then you can be sure that you're building a little bit of muscle. It's just that you're not going to see it for a long time to come because you're on maintenance calories. And you have to be a lot better of a friend to slow progress. And that's okay, as long as you're okay with it. So that's intensity, that's progressive overload. I already spoke about program hopping because if you can't master a movement and then get stronger at that movement, get better at that movement, have that movement be effective for the muscle growth that you want of that particular muscle. If you're always changing it, you can't grow what you aren't overloading over time. How much stronger are you at the leg press than you were last year? Are you any stronger at it? I took almost a year off leg pressing. I wasn't as strong at it when I came back to it, but I was able to build it up to where I was when I left, plus a little bit more. But then once you're at like this advanced level, there are going to be parts where you're plateauing with that weight. And then you might increase it a little bit more and then plateau with that weight. That is progress as well. You're still lifting quite heavy weight. You can't get to like 200 kilos on something or 200 pounds on something and be like, I'm not progressing if you're not pushing it further. Well, you came from like 50 pounds to start with. That's what I mean by you built muscle if you went from 50 to 100 over the course of a year. Just remembering that whatever you did in the first 4 to 8 weeks would be mostly neurological, mostly brain-wise. Then there's if you improve form, any of that stuff. But otherwise, you can be sure to say that it's muscle. If you're getting stronger, you're building muscle. There are 7 different adaptations that happen without muscle tissue growing. I'm going to explain that to you because I feel like it's really important to understand that just because you're getting stronger doesn't mean you're building muscle unless your program is specific to you. That's why a lot of people can be following programs. They can be someone who trains really freaking hard on programs too. Like you might be that person who's following a training app that changes it every 4 or 6 weeks, even if they change it every 8 weeks or you change your program every 8 weeks. Is there a logical progression that sequences over those programs that link them together that progresses you? And are you actually watching yourself on filmage? Because that shit matters. Like all the other stuff is great as an entry point. But if you want to grow your glutes and change your legs, this is important. This is really freaking important. That's why I was going to do the progress episode before this one. But I knew that I was going to touch on it in here anyway. The other one's going to pretty much put a bow on what progress looks like. But you need to have logical progressions over the sequences of your programming. Because now you know it is not just numbers going up. It's not just you changing programs every 8 weeks and going from like, okay, well, I did a back squat, I'm going to do a front squat or a front squat to a back squat, or I'll progress the dumbbells to a barbell. It needs to have some rhyme or reasoning over the course of your life cycle. Things need to be periodized. And I don't mean periodized as in, okay, we're going to go from doing everything in the 12 to 15 reps all the way down to 6 to 8. Because what you don't train in that particular rep range can be lost as a skill and then you'll have to retrain it, and that's okay. That's why I'm a big fan of power building. I used to believe in the old periodization model and then I learned better. I grew up. And even though I used to believe in that, I always used to program as power building because I thought it gave people the best of both worlds, and it always did. Because my clients used to get the best results when I used to do comp prep. And I've just found that people aren't as committed to doing that stuff since the lockdowns. I think because the world has just got more busy and no one has time to really put into anything. But I love building like stellar physiques, even just to live life. It's like my favorite thing to do. So there's that. Now, when I first started this episode, I spoke about pelvic stability, hip mobility, and the foot. And I'm going to come back to this because you literally will not get what you want out of exercises without that. And that's exactly why you need to get good at movements over the months, over the weeks, and changing exercises or trying to confuse the muscle or whatever people tell you isn't going to allow you to do that. Understanding how to use your toe. If you wear shoes when you train, you're already entering the gym with a huge disadvantage. Take your shoes off, or at least get shoes that allow you to plant your toe into the ground. Some of the flat shoes don't allow you to do that either. I'd rather you get something like deadlift slippers because they're cheap versus if you got barefoots and you only wear them for the gym and then you don't want to spend that much money on barefoots. That's fine. Deadlift slippers are cheap. Highly recommend those. So once we understand what our feet need to do and our hips need to do, we need to understand the why, because I'm not here to just tell you, I'm here to teach you the why. And I've already said that exercises in the lengthened position where you are getting sufficient range of motion, which is why hip mobility is so key, are the best for glute growth. Hence why Romanian deadlifts are the key. One of the IFBB pros that I was chatting with the other day, she's like, yeah, I completely stopped doing hip thrusts because they just weren't working, wanting to just keep them in, but I had to hand over the reins to a coach because I was getting in my own way. And the first thing that he came to me with is I needed to stop loading myself with hip thrusts all the time. Now it just does glute hyperextensions and a lot of other exercises in the length and range, with the RDL being her main one. It's not that glute bridges or hip thrusts are bad, but if they are literally your main focus for growing glutes, you're doing it wrong. You're underfeeding the muscle in terms of exercise. If you're underfeeding it in terms of food as well, then you're underfeeding it twice, and that's not going to work. Segue into the foot. One thing with the foot is when you're doing Romanian deadlifts, you want to make sure that, yes, you have the tripod foot. I find that a lot of people put too much focus on their heels and the backs of their feet when doing any forms of Romanian deadlifts or glute work in that domain. And then when it comes to squats, they put too much tension on the fronts of their feet. So we want to make sure that neither of those are happening. But more than anything, we want to make sure that we are using that big toe. We need to make sure that we build stability before we add load. We want stability in our pelvis. We want stability in our feet. And we want to make sure that we can brace. Breathing, bracing, locking our ribs over our pelvis. So understanding the 90-90 hip shift, which if you're one of my clients, I already know you know this because it's one of the key fundamentals that I get you all to learn. And the 90-90 breathing, that teaches you how to connect to your pelvis and to your core when you are bracing. So those are huge. Even things like McGill curl ups, because that teaches you to get your pelvis to your hips as you, I guess, crunch, but it's not really a crunch, it's a curl up. So get your bracing under, like, understand bracing before you load. Brace before you load, brace before you move, all that kind of stuff. Because your back is just going to steal the load, and not in a progressive way. That's going to hurt. You're not going to be able to load something and progress something if your back keeps getting in the way and you have all these other instability issues that you overshot, well, not overshot, but like you stepped over because you didn't want to take the time to learn it. And this is the same thing with dieting. This is why people end up dieting their whole lives, and before they know it, they're in perimenopause, and now they're in a place where they can't really build muscle or lose fat, because you're not in a place to really lose fat when you're in perimenopause, because your body's under stress. When you're going through perimenopause, you want to maintain as much as you can, because it's during that period of time when most people gain weight. And the more that you try to lose weight in perimenopause, the more that you end up gaining it, because you can't force an already exhausted, high cortisol shot body. Your body is under severe stress. It's got nothing to do with cortisol itself. It's just that your body is under stress. You need to do the best that you can to maintain over that period of time until you make it out the other side, and then you can lose fat, and then you can build muscle, because you can still build muscle and lose fat. It's just that building muscle is close to impossible, but it's still possible. Like, you can build muscle at any age. You can build muscle at 70. It's shown in research. It's just so much harder because you need to have all your ducks in line, like all your ducks. You can't afford to wing it once you turn 40. Like, I would argue once you turn 30, you can't afford to wing it, because that's the time when you want to set yourself up for your 50s. And glutes are already really freaking hard to grow. And the reason why I'm bringing this up in this podcast is because your legs are your longevity muscle. They are your longevity muscle. The more muscle mass and strength that you have in those legs, the more power that you can produce in those legs, the more mobility that you have in those legs, the longer you're going to live. The longer you are going to live a high quality life. It's huge. You need to put so much intent into this. This is more than just aesthetics. Yes, in your 20s. Yes, in my 20s, I was stuck there. Many of us are still stuck there because we're so unhappy with where we're at, but we need to start future pacing. Just like dumb shit that I did when I was young. It's like, well, that's never going to happen to me. I'll deal with it when that time comes and then live in regret. But I don't live in regret because it's helped me get to where I am now and given me the life I have now in a sense. But it is what it is. Said, accessory work for this very reason and for many other reasons isn't optional. You need to treat it like the main course, but it's not the main course. It's just that without it, your main course isn't going to be high quality. It's just going to be a raw steak, and you don't want raw steak. You want it to be at least medium rare, but that's probably a really bad example. Let's go with chicken because at least with raw chicken, it actually makes you sick and you want to make sure the chicken's cooked all the way through. You don't want to be served raw chicken. You don't want to be served a raw RDL. We want to make sure that it's cooked. So this is where a lot of people get it wrong because you track your deficit down to the gram. You make sure you're doing everything perfectly, everything right when it comes to calorie deficits. But when it comes to building muscle and doing your accessory work and doing all of these little things like your bracing, your learning how to lock, learning how to use your big toe, you need to put the same intent into that. If you put that same hyperfixation, focus, worry, concern, stress into all of these components that build a physique, like bracing, lats, I already mentioned that, you are going to see your physique change in ways that you never believed possible because now you can load it. Now you can learn how to train with intensity without the fear of hurting yourself. But you will pull all these different things and have niggles and injury if you're also continually underfueling yourself or if you have a high stress load or your training is just ridiculous. And by that I mean you're training 5 times a week, 6 times a week while trying to live a normal human life. Like 4 times a week is plenty if you're over 35. You need time to recover. So that's huge. Once you get that on track, it is going to be so much easier for you to be consistent because inconsistency is why you will never see results because you need to train with intensity consistently over time. Then those weeks off on holiday aren't going to stress you out so much because you've been consistently intense and intentful. I'll say intentional for most of it. Then you won't be bored because you will feel like you're progressing. You care about results. Once you realize that this is getting you results, you'll be okay with being bored. You'll be okay with all of that. So I hope this helps. The next podcast, I'm actually going to be talking about what progress looks like. This is why my clients do it differently and my clients get results. Because if you follow the plan, you go all into the plan and you're patient with learning all of this stuff, you do the things you need to do to get there, you'll get results. Like you don't have to do all the things all of the time. That's fine. As long as you're patient with yourself. I have clients moving at all different paces. I have clients that are going sluggishly slow. And if they're okay with it, then I'm okay with it too. It's just that we live really busy lives. And if anything, I'm more proud of them because they used to be someone that rushed for results and now they're okay to just do it at their own pace because they recognize that they want to live their lives and get better at their own pace because now they trust me. They trust the fact that they're going to get there if they just keep on the path that they're on. So we need to stop obsessing protein targets and calorie calculators and what oils are good and bad and this, that, and the other. We need to focus more on what actually leads to the growth that you want, the shape that you want, because then you're going to start to believe in yourself a lot more and you're going to realize that everything out there is just bullshit. It just pulls at our heartstrings because it's fancy and sexy and it's so much easier to change that than to put in the physical work to get somewhere. But it saves so much time, so much stress, and it sets you up for life. Send this to someone that it could benefit. And if you need help to implement all of this yourself and you don't want to think about how to piece it all together, or if you want someone to look over your program, I will do a free program audit. Just shoot it to me on Instagram. If it needs an email, send it to me in my email, ruby@teamruby.com or transformxruby.com, which you should know how to spell transform. But after transform, there's X and then ruby.com. You can access everything else on there. But shoot me a program. I'll have a look at it for you. Let me know what you are worried about, what your concerns are, and we can go from there. But otherwise, I hope this helped. I hope that you got a whole new perspective on this. And you will hear me on the next solo episode talking about what progress looks like in reality.